You can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. Thank you, Pat. And Jerry Bellin was the Sunday school teacher of the best Sunday school I was ever in, and I still tell that to people, and they look at me like, you went to Sunday school, huh? Yeah. Great, those were learning years, those 40s. We're going to do a reading together, and we're going to have our sermon today is from Julian of Norwich. The words that we are about to read are from Julian of Norwich. We're going to take our time. I will read the light letters, you'll read the bolded ones, but I'll help you with yours. Some of the language is a little convoluted. It's coming to us from 1390, but it seems really precious. So where do we begin? Begin with the heart.
Peace and love are ever in us, being and working, but we be not always in peace and in love.
He said not, thou shalt not be tempested, thou shalt not be travailed, thou shalt not be diseased. But he said, thou shalt not be overcome.
If there is anywhere on earth a lover of God who is always kept safe, I know nothing of it, for it was not shown to me. But this was shown, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in that same precious love.
Truth sees God, and wisdom contemplates God. And from these two comes a third, a holy and wonderful delight in God, who is love.
We are in God, and God, whom we do not see, is in us.
The ground of mercy is love, and the working of mercy is our keeping in love.
And all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be exceedingly well.
And from the book of Mark. And one of the scribes came up to him, to Jesus, and heard them disputing one another. And seeing that he answered them well, asked him, what commandment is the first of all? And Jesus answered, the first is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and there is no other but he, and to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more than all burnt offering and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the realm of God. And after that, no one dared ask any question. He dropped the mic and walked away. So, I always write an introductory paragraph, and I have it right here, and it has changed every day this week because there has been a crisis every day this week. This has been a grueling week, and it ended last night with the news of what happened in Pittsburgh. I believe that all of us feel as if we are being tenderized and pulverized, and this is a hard week and a hard time. So I'm not going to read my introduction because that is our introduction. We are here, all of us are here, our intelligence, our hearts, our feelings, and are wondering what in the world is going on. We have the swampiest Washington, D.C. we've ever seen. I wouldn't send in an alligator without a flak vest. So yes, we are living in a critical and dangerous time, but we are not the first. I first encountered Julian of Norwich in a seminary class on mysticism when I was in my 20s, back when I could read for hours without falling asleep. I had been raised in such a religiously patriarchal culture that reading Julian for the first time was as if someone turned on the lights in the room. Here was a woman 600 years before me, who when she turned inward, despite what she had been taught to think about herself, she did not find a craven mass of sin and evil. She found spirituality, endurance, and love. When what she wrote became some of the most poetical theology ever written, you've just heard some of it. She wrote her Revelations of Divine Love in 1393, although she wouldn't be widely read until the 20th century. So, some background, because if there's anything I learned in seminary, it's that the more you understand the context of a message, the more you understand the message. England, in fact, all of Europe in the 1300s, was an awful place in time. If you occasionally time travel, don't go there. In 1300, the population of England was 5 million, and the average lifespan of their royals, the only people for whom there are records, was 35 years. By 1400, the population was 2 million, and the average lifespan was 17 years. The chaos started with climate change. Scientists think a huge volcano erupted in New Zealand in 1315, which sent so much ash into the atmosphere it changed the amount of sunlight hitting Earth. The next 2 growing seasons worldwide were too cold and too rainy for crops to grow. When one sees those charming photos of ancient stone towers in Europe, many of them were built as grain storage silos after the famines of the 1300s. Tech needs. There would be famines again in 1321, 1351, and 1369. 4 major famines. People died. People committed crimes. People abandoned their children because they couldn't feed them. The story of Hansel and Gretel comes from this century. Next, in 1348, Black Death plague swept over Europe. Black Death starts with a headache and a fever. Now we're all going to go home today with a headache. Then dark, blood-filled pustules appear on and under the skin. They erupt internally and externally. Death generally comes within 1 agonizing week. Half of Europe, already weakened by starvation through those 2 famines, half of Europe died in 1348. Plague appeared 2 more times in that century. You've probably heard of the 100 Years' War. Battles between the English and French lasting from 1337 until well into the 1400s. More than 100 years of exhausting, decimating war. 3.5 million soldiers and citizens died. The only allowed religion in England was an often brutal Catholicism. People who opposed it were harassed and sometimes executed. John Wycliffe and the Lollards, predecessors of Protestantism, so predecessors of us, were increasing in bustling cities like Norwich, to the point where there was a site in the city of Norwich called the Lolly Pit, where Lollards were tortured and sometimes burned alive. Priests preached sin, sin, and more sin, as if threatening people with eternal damnation would make them more moral. God was angry at you. Christ was the one who had suffered to make you grateful enough to live a pure life. So if you weren't pure, say you were poaching animals because your family was starving, you were sinning, so good luck in hell. In 1349, following the first outbreak of Black Death, 600 men called flagellants, which Len has warned me sounds too much like what you think you just heard. These were desperate religious fanatics who believed they could appease God. These men wandered England as beggars, wearing only pants, hats with crosses sewn into them, and no shirts, not even in winter, while carrying whips to whip themselves with every step. This was the mindset of that century. The logical response to pain and loss is self-torture. If you visit the Wisconsin Museum of Art in West Bend, or if perhaps you have a painting hanging there from time to time, There is a huge painting there which features these guys walking into a town. I was so surprised to see this in West Bend that I forgot to write down the name of the painting or the artist, though it covers an entire wall in one of the galleries. Now you know what you'll be looking at when you see it. This was Julian's world. Yet, this is what Julian of Norwich wrote. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. How did she get from loss and brutality to a spirituality of wellness and love? Her life, we don't know very much about her. She was 6 when the Black Death first ravaged England. She may have played the then modern children's game of Ring Around the Rosie, pockets full of posies. Posies were the black buboes that looked like flowers blooming across people's skin. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. That kind of a 6-year-old. 1% of European women in the 1300s were literate. That Julian could read and write says either her family could afford to educate her, or she joined a convent as a novitiate. If she didn't become a nun, then she was probably married by around age 15, which was normal then. She was 19 when round 2 of the plague hit. She probably nursed and then lost to death her husband and her toddlers and her babies, if she had them. All we can be sure of is that this woman, like all English citizens at that time, suffered. What we do know is that when she was 30, she became so ill that a priest administered last rites to her. When the priest held the crucifix over her, she opened her eyes, looked on the cross, and fell into visions. Over the next few days, she would have 16 visions that she called the showings of divine love. After the months it took for her to recover, she went to the local cathedral. It's still there. There's a woman in my congregation in Waukesha who grew up next to it. She went there to become an anchoress, a person who chooses to live their entire life inside a single room built off the side of the church. The thing is, the door into the church would be bricked shut. The room would have small windows, one for food, one for firewood. The other window, and this is important, the other small window was for people who came to her with spiritual questions and requests for prayer. Where the priest was there for confession and mass, the anchoress was around to the side of the church, and you could talk to her if you were scared or sick or your heart was breaking or you didn't know what to do. All the anchoress had to offer was a listening ear, prayer, and caring. I bet her little window was busier than the confessional. There were very few books at that time, rarely even Bibles. She would have spent her life in listening to the hearts of people who visited her and in prayer and contemplation. Her scripture would be her intuition of what was going on around her. She may have been able to read the Bible a little bit. She wouldn't have had a Bible in the room and no other documents to read. If this seems extreme, let me invite you to consider what your life felt like in the years following great illness or great loss. It realigns what you think is important and how you want to spend the rest of your life. In 1373, the year she became sick, she wrote down her first 16 visions. By 20 years later, living in that little room, she had added theological explanations about what she thought her visions illustrated of the nature of spiritual life. Her theology that had evolved from her years in that little group. She made points we still struggle with. One is the role of sin. Remember, this was a world where God turned away from sinful humans. Priests were the ones who were qualified to say what was and wasn't sinful, and the rich people of the upper classes collaborated with the church to ensure that the message remained. Repent, don't think, don't ask questions, don't do anything differently than we allow. Terrifying people by preaching sin has always been about power. Yet Julian wrote, sin is beholdly. Beholdly was a medieval word that I really like, and it means useful or necessary. Sin is useful. It is not the blackness that dooms us to hell. Rather, the mistakes we make and the wrong paths we knowingly or unknowingly choose that can propel us into our spiritual lives. In Julian's time, and often now, people pronounced everything human as tainted, sinful, and decaying. Only the things of spirit have value. To this she said, no. We are made of human flesh and live in a world set in motion by the divine. So this world and our lives have holiness and value in them. To lift up ordinary life as holy because it can lead us into spirituality, this was a radical thing to say then and still is. Someone called this our sacred journey. This positive value for human life is close to heresy and medieval Christianity. Claiming that sin could be a path to God was courting disaster from powerful men who were burning lawlords for less. It was probably a good thing that she was, in her own words, a lowly woman. No one important was paying any attention to her. Julian contemplated love, joy, and compassion. She didn't see suffering as punishment, but a means of being drawn into spirituality and love. She does not give us freezing men whipping themselves, but a quiet life and a tiny home at the beck and call of hurting, hungry, frightened, and grieving people in her town who would stop at her window to talk. She wrote that this is our calling. It is God's will that we be occupied in knowing and loving until the time comes that we be fulfilled in heaven. Loving and knowing, loving and learning. This is her faith statement, and it's ours too. We live in a fraught nation and a fraught time, but our response is worth examining. We say and know we are people of faith and we are people of love. There is nothing wrong with panic, fear, and anger, but for the long haul, we can claim our salvation to live now in love, caring, and compassion. We live most fully when we are giving, sharing, laughing, and encouraging. We are the inheritors of Julian's promise. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Heather Heyer was a woman killed in Charlottesville when a white nationalist rammed his car into a crowd. Heather Heyer was Julian's age, early 30s. This is what her friend said who was with her that day. This is our city. We work here, we live here. We didn't want neo-Nazis and racists to come into our city and think they could spread their hate. We wanted to let them know that we were about love. That's what Heather stood for. That's why she was out there. That's why we were out there. Heather worked as a paralegal for a law firm, assisting clients through the bankruptcy filing process. Not exactly the cutting edge of anything on the surface. A clerk in a bureaucratic process that was generally utilized by people who were poor or at a very stressful time in their life. A co-worker said that Heyer didn't take vacations and often ate lunch at her desk because she was dedicated to her clients. Clerical people who put themselves at your service. They are rare and amazing, aren't they? One more lowly woman serving and loving the people in front of her. The friend said Heyer worried that the day before the protest there would be gun violence at the Nazi rally. Heather said, I want to go so badly, but I don't want to get shot. I don't want to die. But then she went because she wanted to stand up for what she believed. Heather's mother, Susan Bro, talked about her daughter at the funeral. When Heather had first talked to her mom about white privilege, her mom said she responded. Her mom lived in a trailer on not very much money in the back of Kentucky or Tennessee. Honey, I don't have white privilege. If there's white privilege out there, I'd sure like to have some of it. But then Heather dated a black man. Heather's mom said that she began to notice the dirty looks they received when they went out. She realized they got slow service when they went to places, and that in some restaurants they had hair in the food that had to be sent back. Her mom said at the funeral, Heather said I was woke because I understood white privilege. Her mother continued, Heather didn't start the civil rights movement, Heather didn't create it, but somehow her death touched a match to the kindling of a fire that was already laid. And that fire is People want to make the world a better place. It seems her death has been a pivotal point to understand. You show up. You show up and be counted. Julian says, love is where we came from. It is a path on which we must choose to live. It's where we are going. This is her faith statement. Heather Heyer was in Julian 645 years later, showing us what a life of daily, unsentimental love looks like. In her small job, not much fancier than a bricked-in room of a no-name church, in that job, Heather helped others. The day she died wasn't her first protest. She had been active in efforts to combat racism in her community. She lived a life of serving, of woke love. There's so much to do, as always. We have our lives to run, we have calls and emails to make to our representatives, doors at which to knock, postcards to mail, and our blessed daily lives to live, the regular round of our lives. Through it all, remember this from Julian. The ground of mercy is love, and the working of mercy is persevering in love. And all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be exceedingly well. Thanks.